This is Drew McIntyre with his devastating Claymore move. Seeing him, you might think that with a physique like that, it must have been easy for him to succeed in the WWE. But think again. His career is one of the most incredible ones between tragedies, alcoholism, and unlikely twists of fate. We can truly say that he lived a fascinating odyssey before living supreme glory. It is a pleasure to meet you on the Wrestling Paradise to dive into it together, and the Scottish Warrior's life may surprise you. You will learn, among other things, why the plans for Drew abruptly changed at WrestleMania 26, how alcoholism almost destroyed his career for good, but also which scene with Triple H particularly impacted him when he was a kid, and even his special relationship with Vince McMahon.
A future world heavyweight champion.
And you'll never guess the music he was listening to at the gym during his transformation. You are on the Wrestling Paradise, Drew McIntyre's odyssey from alcoholism to glory. Let's go. It was supposed to be his big moment. After so many years of hardships, he was ready to triumph in front of a crazy crowd. He had to main event WrestleMania against Brock Lesnar at the Raymond James Stadium in Tampa to live the ultimate glory there. But instead, he had to settle for a victory in a small, completely empty arena in which you could hear a pin drop.
Brock Lesnar goes one-on-one with Drew McIntyre.
That day, Drew McIntyre was robbed of this consecration in front of thousands of WWE fans that he wanted so much. A global context came to interfere with his fate, but it takes more than that to discourage the Scot, because as you will realize, he is not only a warrior in the ring, but also in real life. Who could have imagined what Drew McIntyre's career would be like when he started in this industry? The least we can say is that nothing has ever gone according to plan in his career. You will see. When he was young, Drew had a dream to become the first Scot to sign with the WWE, the world's biggest wrestling federation. Put yourself in the shoes of the people who told him he was crazy. He came from a village in a small country in Europe. No one had ever managed to become a sports entertainment star there. But for him, it didn't matter at all. Even if he wanted to become a soccer player at the Glasgow Rangers professional club at one time, he will pursue this wrestling dream against all odds. From his youth, someone has an important influence in his life. His mother. He describes her as the strongest person he has ever known. He told that it was a woman who had to fight against disease, who fought to give birth to Drew while she was advised to have an abortion, and that she risked death. She had major balance problems, but she still managed to move bravely. He sees her as a real superhero. For the record, the Scot was watching pro wrestling tapes in his room. He was particularly impacted by the Tough Enough show. This is a reality TV show in which the contestants competed for a WWE contract. He remembers a scene with Triple H that explained the harsh reality of the wrestling profession, which Drew still remembers vividly.
You either want this or you don't.
Imagine that he even slept in a Stone Cold Steve Austin bed.
And that's the bottom line. What? 'Cause Stone Cold said so.
The book of the legend Mankind is the first one Drew has read in full in his entire life. He was thinking about wrestling all the time. As you will have understood, we are talking about a real passionate fan. At home, he dressed up as a wrestler. With friends, they do shows in their gardens. At the age of 15, he took the train with his best friend to go to a wrestling school in Portsmouth, in the south of England. Why go so far? It's simple. In Scotland, there was literally nothing. He trained in hard conditions, but nothing hindered his passion and his desire to become a WWE superstar. One day, he even had the chance to have a little lesson from the veteran Jake Roberts. When we see him do his first shows in the UK, what do we say to ourselves? We can see that he is comfortable in the ring, that he is confident. By developing more, he could have the physique of a main eventer since he is 6'5". He seems destined to succeed in this business and to go to America, just like William Regal a few years before him. However, you will see that his journey will be much more complicated than it could have been, especially for a particular reason that we will see in a few minutes. At that time, he even had the chance to meet Mick Foley, the guy behind Mankind whose book he had read. When they went to the bar with his colleagues and he spent a lot of money, he used to say that Vince McMahon was going to pay for all this. But did he have any idea that a few years later, he would be in a television segment with the former WWE boss that no other wrestler ever had? Hang in there, because this will be a turning point in his career. In the meantime, he is working hard. Instead of studying, he spends all his savings on wrestling. He buys supplements, everything you need to build muscle and become a titan like Vince McMahon likes them. As early as 2005, he was already crossing the path of a certain Sheamus. All the following years, his fate will be very much linked to the Irishman's, who also dreamed of the WWE. In any case, in 2007, we have a first big turning point in Drew's life. Check this out. In April, he had a tryout for the American Federation in London. It is simply a casting to eventually be recruited by the company, his big dream. He participates in it, also with Sheamus and Wade Barrett, the future leader of the Nexus clan. That day, he catches the eye of the official John Laurinaitis, who wants to take him with him to the United States. Sheamus says Drew was the one who made the biggest impression. From this tryout, he was already the chosen one, the wrestler chosen by the company with a tremendous potential.
Kid, I'm thinking about bringing you to America. I looked him in the eye and said, Johnny, I'm thinking about letting you.
At that moment, we move on to a new big chapter of his life, the one that will change everything, for better and for worse. He moved to Louisville, Kentucky to train at Ohio Valley Wrestling. It is in this school that John Cena, Randy Orton and Brock Lesnar were trained, just to name a few. Between Scotland and Kentucky, there are not only 3,746 miles, but also a completely different way of life. But from that moment on, something very rare happens to Drew. You should know that usually a young wrestler would stay in the training center for several years before starting in the main roster or being sent home. For McIntyre, it was quite the opposite. Very quickly, they are already sending him on the road with the company's biggest stars. As early as October 2007, a few weeks after signing with the Federation, he was already debuting on SmackDown, one of the weekly shows. He was accompanied there by veteran Dave Taylor. We notice his kilt and his very Scottish identity. He had just arrived in the United States and he was already on television. It was the American dream, everything was happening like in a fairy tale. But it will soon turn into a nightmare. We could ask ourselves a question. Wasn't it too much for a 22-year-old to arrive in a new continent and have to perform in front of millions of viewers? In the end, he was sent back to developmental at Florida Championship Wrestling. There, he learns, he improves, he wins the Federation's title. His rise is meteoric, as he himself said with conviction.
You're looking at the future of sports entertainment.
One day, Vince McMahon came to take a look at the talents of FCW. Drew looked at him several times during his entrance, made sure to be at his best level. It was a question of choosing several wrestlers to send them to ECW, the third weekly show. Is this what Vince envisioned for McIntyre? No, the boss was enthusiastic and immediately wanted to make him debut on his own on SmackDown, 2 years after having already tried to launch him on the Blue brand. We have to notice that Drew is clearly appreciated by the boss. He seems to be seen as the new golden goose of the company. Everything was going to lead to this amazing scene on the September 25th, 2009 SmackDown. That day, the big boss arrived to the ring to talk, which doesn't happen that often. While the Scot is waiting for his turn, Vince McMahon is saying some very outstanding things, which he has never said before about any young superstar.
It reminds me a lot of me, quite frankly. This man, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be a future world heavyweight champion.
Can you only imagine the WWE boss saying about you that you look like him and that you are a future world champion? No one had ever been put over so much by Vince in person. He was the chosen one, the man chosen by the boss to embody his federation's future. In just 2 years, he seemed to have a very special status that could only lead him to glory. However, let's ask ourselves a question. Couldn't all this have become a burden for Drew? Didn't those words from Mr. McMahon put a huge pressure on him? Would the expectations not be excessive with him, which often leads to even bigger disappointments? Anyway, the success story continued in December. 2 months after these flattering words from the boss, he won the Intercontinental title. You may know this, but keep in mind that this is traditionally a step for great things. It's some kind of test to see if the wrestler has the shoulders to become WWE champion. McIntyre's Odyssey was perfect. His destination was more and more visible on the horizon. Unless a storm would come and send him into the abyss. In 2010, everyone thought we were going to have the first British WWE champion in history. Everything was going so well with Drew, it seemed written. But at that moment, WrestleMania 26 arrives, the biggest show of the year. According to Sheamus, Drew was supposed to face The Undertaker there initially, perhaps the greatest of all time. In the end, the dead man will instead retire Shawn Michaels, and the Scot will be in the Money in the Bank ladder match.
Money in the Bank ladder match, which I think you're supposed to win.
Whoever would pick up this briefcase would get any title opportunity, at any time, for a year. Didn't this object represent an ideal new step for Drew? It will not be so. Vince McMahon prefers to give this briefcase to Jack Swagger. What happened? Is McIntyre no longer appreciated? Did he do something that Vince didn't like? Is he still the chosen one? Looking back, Drew McIntyre admits that it was purely because of himself that this rise was stopped. There was a problem with the man behind the wrestler. Behind the scenes, he is starting to lose control. Nevertheless, something very significant happened in his private life. He was divorcing from the beautiful Tiffany. That's not all. At the same time, he also learns that his mother is doing very badly, that her health has deteriorated to a very serious point. This person who has inspired him since a young age is about to die. Within a few days she was gone, which affected Drew tremendously, while he was still living his dream a few months before his life crumbles.
She was gone. So,
The life of the Scottish warrior was no longer the same. He's collapsing. In the ring, he feels frustrated and angry, pissed off for not being in the spot he thinks he deserves. Drew's decline will be symbolized by a new role that was unthinkable when Vince McMahon praised him in September 2009. Alongside Jinder Mahal and Heath Slater, he forms the 3 Megabytes, the 3-man band, a trio of rock star wannabes. We must be very clear. It was a mid-card gimmick, not serious or believable, which had almost no chance of leading him to the Supreme title. In terms of mentality, Drew was going the wrong way. He blamed other people for it. He considered the creative team responsible for his regression. He wasn't being accountable, he had a victim mindset. The downfall did not end there. In addition to being consumed by frustration and sadness, he began to drink after the shows. His rockstar persona rubbed off on him in a way. He is no longer motivated by his job, his drive was almost dead, and alcoholism is threatening his life.
There was a couple times that I packed his bags for him in the morning and tried to pick him up because he was so hungover.
Drew wasn't well. He drowned his suffering, took refuge in nightlife. Where do you think that led him? You've probably guessed it. McIntyre got fired. In June 2014, he was dismissed by the Federation, less than 5 years after being considered its next big star. Even if it was predictable, he was shocked at the time. Maybe he lacked lucidity? He thought that with his colleagues they did everything they were asked to do at best, that they worked hard. Besides, they had just moved into their first apartment with his new girlfriend. The timing of this dismissal was therefore catastrophic. One thing is for sure, Drew McIntyre has his back against the wall now. If he doesn't take matters into his own hands, he can say goodbye to his success dreams in wrestling, and his situation could get even worse. But he didn't change as soon as he was fired. First, he drank a lot. He disappeared without giving any news, to a point where his wife even wondered if he was dead or in jail. He was doing everything to forget what just happened to him. He no longer had an income. There has always been only wrestling in his life. He was under the gun. Either he was fighting, or he was getting lost for good. After his dismissal, he got calls from little federations who wanted to bring him to their shows. They offered him to come in his rocker gimmick, to do the same thing as in recent years in the WWE. According to Drew, it was a bad idea. He didn't just want to be one of the wrestlers who was happy to be there. He wants to be number one. In his head, he tells himself that he can use social media to bring all his fans into this reconquest, follow him on his way to return to the world's biggest company. It all started with a surprise appearance at the ICW on July 27, 2014. Like a raging tiger, he destroyed everyone. Without the shadow of a doubt, frustration and victim mentality had been replaced by thirst for revenge. For 20 minutes he was talking on the microphone. Now he no longer played a role like in America, where he didn't speak naturally. He was himself without any filter. His speech was amazing. Do you realize that we have a wrestler who is completely honest about himself? It was also a very good idea, in my opinion, to openly say his goal, to become the best wrestler on the planet. Listening to him with all this authenticity, we could only want to support him and follow his odyssey. He was even getting a pretty mind-blowing compliment from an old acquaintance.
So check that out. You'd be shocked at how good that kid can be.
In the Indies, people are talking a lot about him. He wins titles, he gives everything in his matches. In the United Kingdom, the shows in which he participates are breaking records. Even without being in the WWE, Drew was having an equally overloaded schedule for himself. He was working hard. On the other hand, he isn't really there for his wife. Wrestling has taken over everything. But life was putting a test on his path that was going to put everything in order. In 2016, he broke his neck, and for the first time in his career, he was forced to take a break. He was at home with his wife. It was an opportunity to have several frank and fundamental discussions with her and his family. It was nice to wrestle a lot, but he had to stop drinking. As a boyfriend and as a man, he had to change, otherwise their story couldn't continue. At that moment, Drew McIntyre made the right decisions, and they can only inspire us. He adopted a new diet. He no longer went out at night. He no longer drank. He intensified his way of training in the gym. In this big fresh start, he married his girlfriend. A new Drew was being built, who no longer blamed the others, and who was determined to exploit his full potential. From the moment he was accountable and changed, guess what happened? The WWE contacted him again. Seeing his evolution, what he had accomplished in the wrestling world since 2014, Triple H wanted to bring him to NXT, where the Federation now trains its future talents. Now he is more massive, more savage, and above all, he proves in the ring that we can count on him. From there, everything was going very fast. In just a few months, he dominated NXT by becoming champion. He returned to the main roster. He faced Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 35. He became an important heel in the company. His quest was almost complete, but he was missing the most important thing. He had to succeed where he failed in 2010. He had to live up to Vince McMahon's prophecy. So had he really changed deep down inside? Did he have the shoulders to handle the pressure of being on top of the world? Will his physical and mental transformation since 2014 bring him success? Even better, will he finally realize the dream he had when he was watching Tough Enough tapes in his room? Is this burden of being the chosen one, which has made his career in the company much more complicated, definitely vanquished? It's January 26, 2020. At the Royal Rumble, Drew McIntyre walks to the ring. For several minutes, Brock Lesnar has eviscerated all his opponents. For the Scot, there is only one sentence that he repeats to himself in his head.
Been the future for freaking 12 years. It's time to become the present.
It was the big moment for him, the meaning of all these efforts since his dismissal. At the moment when his Claymore threw Lesnar into the abyss of defeat, the crowd exploded, as if this elimination was heard all over the world. Drew destroys Brock, the one whose music he even listened to during his weight training sessions. A few moments later, he wins the Royal Rumble and gets his ticket for the WrestleMania 36 main event. There, he has another appointment with the Beast Incarnate to win this supreme title that he has coveted for so many years. All the stars seem to be aligned. The chosen one will fulfill his destiny. For years, he motivated himself by telling himself that the biggest match he could have in his life would be to face Brock Lesnar for the biggest belt at the Showcase of the Immortals. What he had visualized was becoming real. Isn't it absolutely amazing? In addition, the event would take place in Tampa, the city where he trained at FCW, his second home after Scotland. But something happened that wasn't in his hands.
Everything's come full circle. It is absolutely perfect. Nothing can go wrong.
While he was doing a media tour in the UK, he had to go back to the United States as soon as possible. WrestleMania will take place. But not as he had imagined in his head. There will be a ring, a referee, Brock Lesnar, the supreme title at stake, but no fans, no big stadium in Tampa. Drew admits that he was angry. He felt cursed. It's true that he was unlucky in this situation. But then he will tell himself that he will give the fans an entertaining moment in a difficult context.
Contest scheduled for one fall is for the WWE Championship!
At WrestleMania 36, Drew McIntyre's Odyssey included one last mission. To defeat the final boss, the one who ruled the Federation during all these years when the Scot was experiencing hard times and rising from the ashes. One Claymore won't be enough. He must hold on through the Beast suplexes. He must resist against the F5 that has destroyed so many wrestlers. A fourth Claymore will seal the match for good.
McIntyre fulfills his destiny! McIntyre is WWE Champion!
He officially becomes the first British champion in WWE history. From 2007 to 2020, the Scottish Warrior fought for this kind of trophy that symbolized so much. It represented his ultimate victory as a new man, metamorphosed, freed from a burden that had haunted him for years. He had finally proved Vince McMahon right, the one who believed in him from day one. Along the way, he worked hard, improved, relapsed, sank into his vices, experienced terrible trials. But everything was making sense now, to his father's big happiness.
Proudest moment of my life.
From gardens in Scotland to American arenas, from alcoholism to glory, Drew McIntyre had a journey where nothing went as planned. He could have been champion as early as 2010, but after diving into his Odyssey, it's obvious that his final victory would certainly not have had the same taste. Since his triumph at WrestleMania 36, the Scottish Warrior's journey has also been rather amazing, and it deserves to take a look at it. Indeed, despite this triumph at the Showcase of the Immortals, Drew will nevertheless be haunted by an obsession, managing to win the title in front of fans, to be able to share his victory with a cheering crowd. We can understand that, because despite everything, it was frustrating to have the biggest success of his life in a little, completely empty arena. Somehow, a new odyssey began at that moment. His quest for a major title to celebrate it with thousands of spectators, and you will see that here too, his path has not been linear at all, quite the contrary. Once again, there were twists, problems, frustrations. About a year after becoming champion and after taking it back from Randy Orton, Drew McIntyre lost his title to The Miz. The latter, opportunistic as he is, was taking advantage of a moment when the powerful Bobby Lashley attacked Drew after he had won an Elimination Chamber match. In the end, Lashley became champion during this road to WrestleMania 37, and we imagined a dream scenario for the Scot. For the return of fans in the arena after all these months in empty places, Drew could regain the title and celebrate with them. It would have been even more justified by the fact that he carried the company on his back for much of this period without a crowd. But that day, to everyone's surprise, it was Bobby Lashley who beat McIntyre in the opening match of WrestleMania 37. Was this triumph just postponed? Not really, as you'll see. In October 2021, Big E retained his WWE title against him at Crown Jewel, with the fans who are now back in the arenas for good. In September 2022, everything was put together for him to finally experience this beautiful moment. At the Clash at the Castle show, we were in Wales, very close to Drew's native land. Could he dream of a better place to relieve his obsession? It would be even more memorable since he was facing Roman Reigns there, who had been champion for more than 2 years at that time. McIntyre would therefore make history. The Scot will get very close, but because of an interference by Solo Sikoa, he will get screwed at home in addition. Subsequently, at Crown Jewel 2023, he will fail to win the World Heavyweight Championship against Seth Rollins. At WrestleMania 40, he will beat him and finally win a major title in front of fans. It was without counting on CM Punk, who ruined his party, and Damian Priest, who cashed in his Money in the Bank briefcase to become champion. A few weeks later, at Clash at the Castle, it was even worse. We are in Glasgow, Scotland, with a crowd full of Drew fans, who is facing Priest for the title. While the environment was perfect to live this moment that he has been pursuing for 4 years, CM Punk ruined everything again, the two men having a very personal rivalry for several months. A few weeks later, Drew McIntyre won the Money in the Bank briefcase and cashed it in a few minutes later when Priest defended his title against Rollins. But once again, CM Punk was ruining Drew's plans, which is definitely recurring in 2024. We even come to wonder if the Scottish Warrior's odyssey to win in front of fans wasn't even crazier than the one he completed in 2020. What is certain is that Drew McIntyre never stays down, and that he probably has a Claymore in reserve for anyone who would still come to upset him.
McIntyre with a Claymore to CM Punk!
And this is how our documentary about Drew McIntyre's admirable journey to his first major title in the Stamford Federation ends. We could realize what an inspiring story it is, because it is not conventional or linear. It is not a simple rise since childhood, but rather a long process with steps forward and backward, victories, defeats, joys and sufferings. In his darkest hours, he held on tight to his dreams to finally have an ideal scenario for his triumph, except for one big detail. I have a debate for you. In your eyes, did Drew McIntyre deserve this big push? Did he convince you as a champion? Come and give your opinion in the comments. I wonder what you think about it, and in any case, it will be interesting to discuss it together. We can say that Drew's journey is incredible. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay on the paradise of wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?